The Frog Prince, a modern magical adaptation, Chapter 1. The drop, the late afternoon sun, glinted off the glass towers of downtown, casting long shadows across Meridian Park. It was one of those perfect autumn days when the city seemed to pause and remember. It was once something wilder, something greener. The ancient fountain at the park's center, a relic from the city's founding, all marble angels and weathered stone, bubbled peacefully, surrounded by tourists taking photos and office workers, stealing a few precious minutes of fresh air. But Princess Celeste Thorne wasn't interested in the fountain's history or the perfect lighting for photographs. At 17, she had more pressing concerns. She perched on the fountain's wide rim, phone in one hand, her other hand gesturing wildly as she spoke to the camera. So, obviously, the fall collection is giving major, enchanted forest vibes, she said, tilting her head to catch the golden hour light. But make it luxury. You know what I mean. Her phone's screen showed the live viewer count climbing 47,000, 48,000, 52,000. Not bad for a Tuesday afternoon. She glanced at the chat flying by, full of heart emojis and comments about her outfit. A perfectly distressed designer jacket that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Oh my God! You guys are asking about the ring? Celeste held up her left hand, and the smart ring on her index finger caught the light, its surface shimmering with an iridescent glow that no amount of technology should have been able to produce. It's a prototype from my dad's company, not even released yet. It tracks everything, your health, your mood, connects to literally every device you own. Plus, it's got this enchanted aesthetic that's just... She gestured dramatically, and that's when it happened. The ring slipped off her finger. She'd lost weight recently, stress from maintaining her image, though she'd never admit that to her followers, and tumbled through the air in what felt like slow motion. Celeste lunged for it, but her fingers closed on empty air. The ring hit the fountain's surface with a small splash and sank immediately into the dark water below. No, 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 no. No. She ended the live stream abruptly and leaned over the fountain's edge, peering into the murky depths. The fountain was deeper than it looked, and the afternoon shadows made it impossible to see the bottom. This can't be happening. A few tourists glanced over, but most went back to their business. In a city this size, someone's minor crisis was just background noise. Celeste pulled out her phone again, pulling up her father's contact, then hesitated. Arthur Thorne, CEO of Thorntech Industries, was in meetings all afternoon. Important meetings. The kind where billion-dollar deals were made. And while he loved his daughter, he'd made it clear that she needed to start being more responsible. Losing a prototype worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, that wouldn't go over well. Think. She muttered to herself, setting her phone down on the fountain's edge. She rolled up her sleeve. The jacket could be dry, cleaned, and reached into the water. It was colder than she expected, and deeper. Her fingers scraped against something slimy, and she jerked her hand back with a disgusted sound. That's not going to work, a voice said. Celeste spun around, looking for the speaker. There was an elderly woman feeding pigeons, a jogger passing by, but no one paying attention to her. She turned back to the fountain. Down here, the voice said, patient and amused. She looked down. A frog sat on the fountain's edge, no more than 6 inches from where her phone rested. It was larger than most frogs she'd seen, not that she'd seen many. Growing up in penthouses and boarding schools, with bright, intelligent eyes that seemed to catch the light in an almost human way. Its skin was a deep emerald green with flecks of gold, beautiful in an unexpected way. Did you just... Celeste started. Talk? Yes, the frog said, its small mouth moving in a way that should have been impossible. Its voice was clear, educated, with the kind of accent that suggested expensive tutors and old money. And before you ask, no, you're not imagining it. No, you haven't had anything to drink. And yes, this is really happening. Celeste blinked. She looked around the park again. No one was watching. No cameras she could see. This wasn't a prank for her channel. She'd know if her team had set something up. I'm losing my mind, she said quietly. You're not, the frog assured her. You're simply experiencing something that most people in this modern world have forgotten is possible. Magic. Miss Thorne. Real magic. How do you know my name? The frog's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. You were just broadcasting to 2,000 people. And besides, everyone knows the Thorn Princess. Your father's face is on half the buildings in this city. Celeste's mind raced. This was insane. Frogs didn't talk. Magic wasn't real. It was aesthetic, a vibe. A marketing term her father's company used to make technology feel more exclusive. But here was this frog, sitting on a fountain in the middle of downtown, having a conversation with her like it was the most natural thing in the world. Okay, she said slowly. Let's say I'm not hallucinating. Let's say you're real. What do you want? I don't want anything, the frog said. But you do. You want that ring back. Celeste glanced at the water. You know where it is. I do. I can see quite well in the dark, you understand. Your ring has settled on the bottom, wedged between 2 stones. You'll never reach it on your own. The fountain is 12 feet deep in the center, built that way to prevent people from wading in and vandalizing it. Can you get it? The words came out before she could stop them. Desperate and pleading. The frog tilted its head, considering her. I could. I'm an excellent swimmer, and the depth doesn't bother me. But I have a condition. Of course it did. Nothing was ever free, not in her world. Celeste crossed her arms. What do you want? Money. I can pay you? I don't have any use for money. The frog interrupted gently. What I want is much simpler and infinitely more valuable. I want your friendship. Celeste stared. My friendship? Yes. Companionship. Someone to talk to spend time with. I've been alone for so very long, you see. And you seem like someone who might understand loneliness. Despite all those followers. The observation hit closer to home than Celeste wanted to admit. She pushed the feeling aside. So what you wanna like? Hang out, go to coffee shops and talk about our feelings. I want you to let me be part of your life, the frog said. Let me sit with you, eat with you, stay near you. Be your friend in truth, not just in name. It sounded simple. Almost too simple. And Celeste needed that ring back. Without it, she'd have to face her father's disappointment. Possibly lose access to future prototypes. Definitely get a lecture about responsibility that would last for weeks. Plus, the ring had all her data on it. Her messages, her health information, her security codes. She couldn't just leave it at the bottom of a fountain. Fine, she said. Yes. If you get my ring back, I'll be your friend. I promise. The frog looked at her for a long moment, its eyes seeming to see right through her casual agreement to the calculation beneath. But then it nodded. Very well. A promise is a promise, princess. And with that, the frog dove into the fountain, disappearing beneath the dark water with barely a ripple. Celeste waited, checking her phone. A few notifications had piled up. Comments on her abruptly ended livestream. Her assistant asking if everything was okay. A reminder about dinner with her father tonight. She ignored them all, watching the fountain's surface. The minutes stretched. Tourists came and went. The sun sank lower, painting the glass towers gold and orange. Celeste was just beginning to wonder if she'd imagined the whole thing when the frog emerged, water streaming from its green skin. In its mouth, held carefully, was her smart ring, still glowing faintly. Oh my God! Celeste breathed, reaching for it. The frog hopped onto the fountain's edge and set the ring down gently. Ace promised. Celeste snatched up the ring, checking it frantically. No water damage. The thing was designed to be waterproof, thank God. All her data was intact. The connection to her phone restored immediately. Relief flooded through her, so intense it made her dizzy. Thank you, she said, and for a moment, she meant it. Thank you so much. You have no idea? My father would have killed me? I'm glad I could help, the frog said. Now, shall we? But Celeste was already standing, slipping the ring back onto her finger. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call from her driver. Perfect timing. I really have to go, she said quickly. Dinner with my dad. You know how it is. But our agreement. Right, yeah, friendship? Totally. She grabbed her phone, already backing away. I'll see you around, okay? Thanks again. And she turned and hurried toward the park's exit, where her town car was waiting, sleek and black, and ready to carry her back to her world of glass and steel and perfectly curated images. Behind her, the frog sat alone on the fountain's edge, water dripping from its skin, watching her go. A promise is a promise, it said quietly to the empty air, whether you meant it or not. Chapter 2. The Return. The Thorn Mansion sat behind high walls in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. All modern architecture and sharp angles, built to showcase Arthur Thorne's vision of the future. Glass and steel gleamed under carefully positioned lights, and security cameras tracked every inch of the property's perimeter. It was less a home and more a fortress, a statement of power wrapped in minimalist design. Celeste sat at her vanity, touching up her makeup before dinner. The smart ring glowed softly on her finger, and she'd already checked 3 times to make sure all her data was backed up. The incident at the fountain felt distant now, dreamlike. Had that really happened? Had she really talked to a frog? Her reflection stared back at her, perfectly composed. The girl in the mirror knew how to smile for cameras, how to angle her face for the best light, how to be exactly what everyone expected. The girl in the mirror didn't believe in talking frogs. A knock on her door made her turn. "Come in." Her father's assistant Marcus stepped into the room. He was young, efficient, always dressed in expensive suits that almost matched Arthur Thorne's. "Your father asks that you come down to dinner, Miss Thorne. The guests have arrived." "Guests?" Celeste frowned. "I thought it was just family tonight." "The Yamamoto executives. They're finalizing the merger with the Tokyo office." Marcus checked his tablet. "Your father thought it would be good for you to join them." Of course he did. Arthur Thorne never missed an opportunity to show off his picture. Perfect family life. Never mind that Celeste's mother had left when she was 6. Or that she barely saw her father, except at carefully orchestrated dinners like this one. "Tell him I'll be down in 5 minutes," Celeste said. Marcus nodded and left, and Celeste took one last look in the mirror. She smoothed down her dress. Elegant but not too formal. Expensive but not ostentatious. And headed downstairs. The dining room was a masterpiece of modern design. All clean lines and floating shelves, with a table that could seat 20, but tonight held only 7. Her father sat at the head, silver-haired, and imposing even while sitting down, talking animatedly with 3 Japanese executives. Her stepmother, Claire, on her phone as usual, sat to his left, barely acknowledging Celeste's arrival. "Ah, there she is," Arthur boomed, gesturing for Celeste to sit beside him. "Gentlemen, my daughter Celeste. Celeste, this is Mr. Yamamoto, Mrs. Sato, and Mr. Tanaka from our Tokyo division." Celeste smiled and bowed slightly, remembering her etiquette training. "It's an honor to meet you. Your father tells us you're quite the influencer," Mr. Yamamoto said kindly. "Very impressive for someone so young." "Thank you. I try to." A sound from the entrance hall interrupted her. It was faint but distinctive, a wet, rhythmic slapping. Like something small and damp, moving across marble floors. Celeste's blood ran cold. Marcus appeared in the doorway, looking confused and slightly disgusted. "Mr. Thorne, I apologize for the interruption, but there's something at the front door. It claims to know Miss Celeste." "Claims to know." Arthur frowned. "Marcus, we're in the middle of dinner. Whatever it is, it's a frog, sir." The table fell silent. Claire looked up from her phone for the first time all evening. The Yamamoto executives exchanged glances. Arthur Thorne's expression darkened. "A frog," he repeated slowly. "Yes, sir. A large one. It hopped past the security gate somehow, and is now at the front door. And it's talking." Celeste felt the room spinning. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now. Not in front of her father's business associates. Talking, Arthur said, his voice flat with disbelief. It says Miss Celeste made a promise to it this afternoon. At Meridian Park Fountain. Every eye at the table turned to Celeste. She could feel her face burning. Her carefully applied makeup suddenly feeling like a mask that was slipping. Celeste. Her father's voice had that edge to it, the one that meant explanations were required, and they better be good. There was a frog at the fountain, she admitted. It helped me get my ring back when I dropped it. I might have said something about being friends. You promised friendship to a frog. Arthur pinched the bridge of his nose. And now it's at our door. From somewhere in the entrance hall, a voice called out, clear and carrying. Princess Celeste, I know you're in there. You made a promise, and I've come to collect. The Japanese executives looked utterly bewildered. Claire actually smiled, amused by the chaos. Arthur stood up slowly, napkin falling to his chair. Everyone, please excuse me for a moment, he said with forced calm. Celeste with me. Now. Celeste followed her father out of the dining room on shaking legs. This was a nightmare. This was going to be a disaster. Her father was going to think she'd lost her mind. And in front of the Yamamoto executives, no less. They reached the entrance hall, and there it was. The frog sat in the center of the marble floor, water still dripping from its emerald skin, looking ridiculously small against the grandeur of the mansion's entrance. It looked up at them with those two intelligent eyes and spoke, in that cultured voice that should not have been coming from an amphibian. Good evening, Mr. Thorne. Your daughter and I had an agreement. Arthur Thorne stared at the frog, stared at his daughter, stared back at the frog. Celeste watched as her father, a man who'd built a tech empire, who negotiated with world leaders, who never showed surprise, processed the impossible. You're a talking frog, he said finally. Yes, the frog agreed. And your daughter promised me her friendship in exchange for retrieving her smart ring from the bottom of Meridian Park Fountain. A promise made is a debt owed, Mr. Thorne. I'm sure a man of your business acumen understands the importance of keeping one's word. It was a challenge, delivered politely but unmistakably. Arthur's jaw tightened. Celeste knew that look. It was the one he got when someone implied he might not honor a contract. Dad, I can explain. Did you make this promise? Her father interrupted, looking at her. Celeste hesitated. She could lie. Say she'd been joking, that she never meant it seriously, that talking frogs didn't count. But her father had built his empire on integrity, on keeping promises, even when they were inconvenient. She'd heard him lecture about it 1,000 times. Yes, she admitted quietly. I promised to be its friend if it got my ring back. And did it retrieve your ring? Yes. Arthur looked at the frog for a long moment, and Celeste could see him thinking, calculating. Then, impossibly, he nodded. Very well. A thorn keeps their promises. He looked at Celeste. All of them. Even the inconvenient ones. Especially those. You can't be serious. I am completely serious. You made an agreement. You will honor it. He turned back toward the dining room, then paused. And you'll do it starting now. The frog can join us for dinner. Dade! Celeste's voice came out as a mortified whisper. But Arthur Thorne was already walking back to the dining room, calling over his shoulder, Marcus, please bring a chair cushion for our guest. And perhaps a small plate. The frog hopped after him, leaving wet marks on the marble floor. Most gracious, Mr. Thorne. Your daughter is lucky to have a father who values integrity. Celeste stood frozen in the entrance hall, wanting to disappear, to sink through the floor, to wake up from whatever bizarre dream this had become. But Marcus was already bringing a cushion, and her father was explaining to the confused Japanese executives that, yes, they did indeed have an unusual dinner guest. And yes, it was a matter of family honor. She had no choice but to follow. To return to the dining room, where a frog now sat on a cushion on the chair beside her, elevated enough to reach the table. Thank you for honoring our agreement, Princess, the frog said as a salad plate was set before it. I knew you were someone of character. Celeste said nothing. She couldn't look at the executives, couldn't meet her stepmother's amused gaze, could barely breathe past her embarrassment. This was social suicide. This was the end of her reputation. Tomorrow, everyone would know that the Thorn Princess had dinner with a frog. But her father had made his ruling, and in the Thorn household, Arthur's word was law. The frog delicately ate a piece of lettuce, making polite conversation with Mr. Yamamoto about international business practices. And Celeste wished desperately that she'd never gone to that fountain, never dropped that ring, never made that stupid, careless promise. A promise is a promise, her father always said. Even when you wish it wasn't. Chapter 3. The invasion dinner was an exercise in sustained humiliation. The frog, it still hadn't offered a name. Celeste realized, proved to be surprisingly charming. It discussed the merger with the Tokyo office, with the kind of insight that made Mr. Yamamoto lean forward, with interest. It complimented Claire's choice of wine. It even made a joke about international tax law that made Arthur Thorne actually laugh. Meanwhile, Celeste pushed her food around her plate and prayed for the evening to end. You know, the frog said, turning its bright eyes toward her. The princess has barely said a word all evening. I hope my presence isn't making her uncomfortable. Every head at the table turned to her. Again. Not at all. Celeste said through clenched teeth, forcing a smile. I'm just processing, of course. It's not every day one encounters real magic in such a modern setting. The frog took a sip of water from the tiny cup Marcus had provided. Though I must say, Princess, you seem to be processing quite a lot lately. The pressures of maintaining your online presence must be considerable. Was it calling her out for ignoring her followers? In front of her father, Celeste felt her cheeks burn. I manage, she said stiffly. I'm sure you do. 2,000 people watching your every move. Quite the audience. Quite the responsibility. Arthur glanced at his daughter, then back at the frog. something calculating in his expression. You seem to know a great deal about my daughter's activities. Only what she broadcasts to the world, Mr. Thorne. Though I wonder sometimes if the world truly sees her, or just the image she projects. The words hung in the air, weighted with meaning. Mrs. Saito delicately set down her fork, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Celeste stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Excuse me. I need some air." She fled to the balcony off the dining room, sliding the glass door shut behind her. The city sprawled below, a sea of lights stretching to the horizon. Up here, 17 floors above the street, she could almost pretend she was above it all. The door slid open behind her. "I apologize if I overstepped," the frog said, hopping out onto the balcony. "You think?" Celeste didn't turn around. "You show up at my house, embarrass me in front of my father's business partners, and then psychoanalyze me at dinner. Some friend you are." So we are friends then." Celeste spun around. "That's not. I didn't mean." The frog hopped closer, its expression surprisingly gentle. "I'm not trying to humiliate you, princess. Quite the opposite. I'm trying to see if there's a real person beneath all that performance. And I think there is. I caught glimpses of her this afternoon, before you remembered to put your mask back on." "You don't know anything about me?" "I know you're lonely," the frog said quietly. "I know what it's like to be surrounded by people and still feel utterly alone. I know what it's like to be trapped in a form that others find strange or off-putting. I know what it's like to long for genuine connection in a world that values appearance over authenticity." Something in its voice made Celeste look at it. Really look at it. There was pain there, old and deep, the kind that came from years of isolation. "How long have you been a frog?" The question came out before she could stop it. "A very long time," the frog said. "Long enough to watch the world change. Long enough to see magic fade and technology rise. Long enough to almost forget what it was like to be anything else." "Why me? Out of everyone at that fountain, why did you choose to help me?" The frog tilted its head, considering. "Because I saw someone who'd lost something precious. Not the ring, though I know that's valuable. But something else. Something you've been losing for a long time, piece by piece, post by post. And I thought perhaps we could help each other find what we've lost." Before Celeste could respond, her father stepped onto the balcony. "The Yamamotos are leaving. Celeste. You should come say goodbye." She followed him inside, the frog hopping along behind them. The executives were gracious in their farewells, if a bit bemused by the evening's unusual turn. When they'd gone, Arthur turned to his daughter with that expression she knew too well, the one that preceded a serious talk. "Celeste. A word in my office." She followed him down the hall to his private study, the frog trailing behind. Arthur didn't object to its presence. He settled into his chair behind the massive desk and steepled his fingers. "I want you to understand something," he began. "In business, your word is everything. If you break a promise, if you fail to honor an agreement, no one will trust you. Your reputation is your most valuable asset. He paused. I know I'm not always here. I know I miss things, recitals, games, important moments. But I'm trying to teach you something crucial. Character isn't what you do when it's convenient. It's what you do when keeping your word costs you something. Dad. It's a frog. It's a promise, Arthur interrupted firmly. And you made it, so you're going to keep it. This creature will stay as your guest until it decides the debt is paid. You will treat it with the courtesy you'd show any friend. Understood. Celeste wanted to argue, to protest, to point out the absolute insanity of hosting a talking frog. But she knew that tone. The decision was made. Yes, sir, she said quietly. Good now, it's late. Show your guest to the spare room. The frog spoke up from its position near the door. Actually, if I might make a request. Our agreement was for friendship. Friends spend time together. I was hoping to stay closer to the princess. Perhaps in her room. Celeste's eyes went wide. Absolutely not. That's not inappropriate. The frog continued calmly. I'm quite small. I don't require much space. A cushion near her bed would suffice. And it would give us a chance to talk. To truly get to know one another as friends do. Arthur considered this. Celeste held her breath, praying he'd refuse. Very well, her father said. Celeste, prepare a space for your guest. Dad, you can't be serious. In my room. My private space. You brought this on yourself. Arthur's expression softened slightly. Think of it as a learning experience. Now go. I have work to finish. Dismissed, Celeste trudged out of the office. The frog hopping cheerfully behind her. She led it to her room. A space of carefully curated aesthetics. Perfect for background shots in her videos, all soft colors and strategic lighting. It felt like an invasion, having this strange creature here. Where would you like me to set up my space? The frog asked politely. Celeste grabbed a cushion from her reading chair and threw it on the floor beside her bed. There. Happy. Quite comfortable, thank you. The frog hopped onto the cushion and settled in. You know, this is a lovely room. Very you. Or at least, very the you that you show the world. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing judgmental. Just an observation. I notice you don't have many personal items. Photos, mementos. Things that tell your story beyond the curated image. Celeste looked around her room, seeing it through different eyes. It was true. Everything here was chosen for aesthetics, for brand alignment. Even her bookshelf was arranged by color rather than by what she actually wanted to read. It's late, she said, changing the subject. I need to get ready for bed. Of course. I'll just be here, on my cushion. Perfectly quiet and unobtrusive. But as Celeste went through her nighttime routine, removing makeup, changing clothes, checking her phone one last time, she was hyper-aware of the frog's presence. It didn't watch her, exactly. It seemed to spend most of its time looking around the room, studying her belongings with those two intelligent eyes. Finally, she climbed into bed and turned off the lights. The city glow filtered through her curtains, casting soft shadows across the ceiling. Princess. The frog's voice came from the darkness. What? Thank you for honoring your promise. I know this isn't easy for you. Celeste said nothing. She pulled the covers up higher and closed her eyes, trying to ignore the fact that there was a talking frog sleeping on a cushion beside her bed. What had she gotten herself into? And more importantly, how long until this bizarre nightmare ended? Chapter 4. The uncomfortable truth. Celeste stared at Harold, her phone hovering in her hand, the camera app open and waiting. The frog sat on her bed, perfectly composed, those intelligent eyes watching her with what might have been amusement. Why not? Harold repeated his suggestion. Show them the truth. Show them the magic. Because, Celeste started, then stopped. Why not? The question hung in the air, heavier than it should have been. Because they'd think it was fake. A prank. Special effects. No one would believe it's real. Would that be so terrible? At least you'd be showing them something true, even if they misinterpret it. Celeste sat down heavily on her desk chair, the phone lowering to her lap. You don't understand how this works. I have a brand, an aesthetic. People follow me for a specific vibe, luxury, aspiration, a glimpse into a life they want. A talking frog doesn't fit that narrative. And what happens when you get tired of performing that narrative? Harold asked quietly. What happens when the girl you pretend to be becomes so different from the girl you actually are that you can't remember which one is real anymore? The words hit like a punch to the stomach. Celeste turned away, looking at her ring light, her backdrop, her carefully arranged props. Harold was right. In a way she didn't want to acknowledge. Sometimes she'd catch herself in a mirror and feel a strange disconnect, like looking at a stranger who'd borrowed her face. You've been watching me for what, a day? Celeste said, her voice sharper than she intended. You don't know me well enough to make those kinds of observations. Perhaps not, Harold conceded. But I've been alive long enough to recognize the signs of someone losing themselves. I've seen it before. Though the trappings were different. Court masks instead of camera filters. Arranged marriages instead of arranged content. The performance is old, princess. Only the stage has changed. Celeste wanted to argue, to defend herself, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she stood and grabbed her phone. I need to go out. Film some content at the new cafe downtown. You'll have to stay here. Actually, I'd like to come with you. Absolutely not. Our agreement was friendship. Friends spend time together, particularly when going out into the world. I can't show up at a public place with a frog. Harold hopped to the edge of the bed. Why not? You have a designer handbag, don't you? I'm quite small. I could travel discreetly. And I'm genuinely curious about this cafe. It's been years since I experienced human social spaces properly. Celeste closed her eyes, counting to 10. Then 20. Her father's words echoed in her mind. A thorn keeps their promises. Fine. But you stay hidden. Completely hidden. If anyone sees you, if anyone hears you, I'll be the very soul of discretion. Harold promised. 20 minutes later, Celeste was walking down the tree-lined street toward Lumina Cafe, her designer tote bag feeling heavier than usual. Inside, nestled among her phone chargers and makeup bag, Harold sat perfectly still. She'd lined the bag with a soft scarf to make it more comfortable, feeling ridiculous the entire time. "This is actually quite pleasant." Harold's voice drifted up from the bag, muffled but clear. "I can see out through the gap at the top. Your city has changed so much. The last time I was out and about, there were horses in these streets, not cars." "How long ago was that?" Celeste whispered, pretending to be on her phone so passers-by wouldn't think she was talking to herself. Difficult to say precisely. Time moves strangely when you're cursed, but the buildings were different. Lower, more organic. These glass towers would have seemed like something from a fairy tale. Celeste pushed through the cafe door. Bells chiming overhead. Lumina was Instagram perfection. Exposed brick, hanging plants, artisanal everything. The scent of expensive coffee filled the air, mingling with the sound of alternative music, playing just loud enough to be heard, but not so loud you couldn't have a conversation. She ordered her usual, an oat milk lavender latte, and found a corner table with good lighting. Setting her bag carefully on the chair beside her, she began arranging her shot the lat. Her journal, which she'd never actually written in, but looked good in photos. A carefully placed pastry. Fascinating. Harold's voice came from the bag. "You're constructing a scene that suggests you're here to journal and reflect, but you're actually here to take a photo of yourself pretending to journal and reflect." "Shh," Celeste hissed. A couple at the next table glanced over, and she quickly raised her phone to her ear, as if taking a call. "Someone might hear you." "Apologies. I'll observe silently." But Harold's words had rattled her. She looked at her carefully staged scene and felt suddenly foolish. How many hours had she spent crafting these perfect moments that were anything but real? How many times had she repositioned a coffee cup to catch the light just right, or rewritten a caption to sound casually profound? She took the photo anyway. Years of habit were hard to break. But when she looked at the result, all she could see was the artifice. The carefully angled cup, the strategic placement of the journal, the soft focus that made everything look dreamlike and unreal. "It's a good photo," Harold said quietly. "Technically. But it doesn't look like you're enjoying yourself. It looks like you're working." "I am working. This is my job. Is it? Or is it what you've convinced yourself has to be your job because it's what everyone expects?" Before Celeste could respond, a voice interrupted. "Oh my God, Celeste Thorne." She looked up to see three girls, probably 14 or 15, clustered beside her table with phones in hand. Their eyes were wide with recognition and excitement. "We follow you?" One of them gushed. "Can we get a photo?" Celeste's professional smile slid into place automatically. "Of course. I'd love to." She stood, arranging herself between the girls, finding her angles by instinct. The tallest girl held up her phone for a selfie, while the others pressed close. Celeste's smile was perfect, genuine, looking but carefully controlled, the kind she'd practiced in mirrors for years. "You're so pretty in person," one of the girls breathed. "Even prettier than in your videos." "Thank you so much," Celeste said warmly. "That's so sweet." "What are you filming today?" another asked. "Can we be in your video?" "Oh, I'm not really filming right now. Just having some coffee. Taking a little break." "But you posted earlier that you were scouting locations," the tall one said. And Celeste realized she had posted that 3 hours ago, part of her morning story updates. "We saw it and hoped we might see you." They'd come here looking for her. The realization was both flattering and deeply uncomfortable. Celeste glanced at her bag, where Harold was hidden, hoping he'd stay silent. "Well, I'm so glad you found me," Celeste said, keeping her voice light. "It was wonderful meeting you all." It was a dismissal, polite but clear. The girls took the hint, thanking her profusely before returning to their own table. But Celeste noticed they kept glancing over, phones out, probably posting about their celebrity encounter. She sat back down, her lat now cold, her carefully staged scene disturbed. "They seemed nice," Harold observed from the bag. "They were," Celeste agreed quietly. "But you looked uncomfortable." "I wasn't," she started, then stopped. "They came here because of me. Because I told the internet where I'd be. They're probably posting about this right now, telling everyone I'm here. In 20 minutes, there might be more people showing up. Is that what you want?" Celeste stared at her cold latte. Was it? She'd built her following by being accessible, by sharing her locations, by creating the illusion that her followers could be part of her life. But lately, it felt less like connection and more like performance. Less like sharing her life and more like losing it, piece by piece, to the expectations of strangers. "I don't know what I want anymore," she admitted, so quietly she barely heard herself say it. "That," Harold said gently, "is the most honest thing you've said since we met." Celeste grabbed her bag, carefully, so as not to jostle Harold, and left the cafe. She didn't take the lat, didn't get the shot she'd planned, didn't post anything. She just walked, wandering through streets she usually only saw from the car, with Harold hidden in her bag and questions swirling in her head. They ended up in a small park. Not the Grand Meridian Park, where they'd met, but a neighborhood green space with a playground and a few scattered benches. Celeste sat down heavily, setting her bag beside her. Harold hopped out onto the bench. "Thank you for bringing me along. Even if it wasn't what you planned." "You were right," Celeste said, watching children play on the swings. "About all of it. The performance, the losing myself, all of it. I don't even know when it started. When I stopped being a person and started being a brand." "You're still a person?" Harold said. "You're just buried under layers of what you think you should be. But that person is still there. I've seen glimpses of her. How do I find her again?" Harold was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of experience. "You start by being honest." with yourself first, then with others. You start by making choices based on what you want, not what you think your followers want to see. You start by living a life instead of performing one. Celeste looked at the frog, really looked at him. Is that what happened to you? Did you lose yourself and get cursed because of it? Something like that, Harold said softly, though the details are complicated. But yes, I was once someone who cared more about appearance than authenticity, about status than substance, and I paid the price for it. How do I avoid paying that price? You already are paying it, princess. Every day you perform instead of live, you pay. The question is whether you're willing to stop paying and start living differently, even when it's uncomfortable. Even when it costs you followers, or likes, or the approval of strangers who don't actually know you. Celeste sat with that for a long moment. Around them, the park continued its afternoon rhythm. Children playing, dogs barking. People passing by absorbed in their own lives. Normal life, lived without cameras or filters or performance. Harold, she said finally. Yes, I'm glad you came with me today. Even though I said I didn't want you to. The frog's expression softened. That's the closest thing to friendship I've heard from you yet. And Celeste realized it was true. For the first time since making her promise, she didn't entirely regret it. Chapter 5. The Price of Promises. The sun was setting by the time Celeste and Harold returned to the mansion. The security guard at the gate nodded them through without comment. After last night's dinner with the frog, apparently nothing could surprise the Thorne household staff anymore. Celeste's phone had been buzzing all afternoon with increasingly frantic messages from her assistant, Mira. She'd posted nothing since that morning, had missed her afternoon content slot, and worst of all, had been spotted at Lumina Cafe, but hadn't shared any of the experience with her followers. The three girls had posted their photo with her, and now her followers were asking why Celeste was hiding things from them. Hiding things from them, she muttered, scrolling through the comments. Like I owe them a real time feed of my entire life. Don't you, though? Harold asked from his position on her shoulder. She'd given up on keeping him in her bag after the park, and he'd ridden there for the walk home, surprisingly light and warm. Isn't that the implicit contract you've made with your followers? Access to you. In exchange for their attention. You're not helping. I'm not trying to help. I'm trying to make you think. They entered the mansion to find an unusual scene. Her father's study door was open, and voices drifted out. Arthur's, and another she didn't recognize. Celeste paused in the hallway, Harold still on her shoulder. Quite impossible, I assure you, the unfamiliar voice was saying. It was refined. British perhaps, with the kind of crisp pronunciation that suggested old money and older traditions. The magical realm has been sealed for nearly 2 centuries. Nothing gets in or out without extraordinary circumstances. And yet here we are, discussing a talking frog that appeared in my fountain and followed my daughter home. Arthur replied dryly. I'd call that extraordinary. Celeste's breath caught. Someone else knew about Harold. She crept closer to the study door, Harold utterly still on her shoulder. May I see the creature? The stranger asked. Celeste! Arthur called out, somehow knowing she was there. Come in, please. And bring your friend. She had no choice but to enter. The study looked the same as always. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, Arthur's massive desk, the wall of windows overlooking the city. But standing beside her father was a man who looked utterly out of place in the modern setting. He was tall and thin, dressed in a three-piece suit that looked like it had been tailored sometime in the Victorian era. His hair was silver, swept back from a high forehead, and his eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray with hints of deeper darkness. He held a walking stick topped with a crystal that seemed to catch and reflect light that wasn't there. Princess Celeste, the man said, bowing slightly. His gaze fixed on Harold with an intensity that made the frog shift uncomfortably. And the frog in question. How very interesting. Celeste, this is Aldrich Thorne, her father said. A distant relative of ours. Very distant. He's come with some unusual information about your friend. Aldrich Thorne, Celeste repeated. She'd never heard of any extended family, and her father's expression suggested this was news to him too. The connection is quite remote, Aldrich said smoothly. Several centuries and numerous branches removed. But we share blood nonetheless. I've been tracking magical disturbances in the city, and imagine my surprise when I detected this. He gestured toward Harold, and to Celeste's shock, the crystal on his walking stick began to glow with a soft golden light. Harold made a small sound of distress. Stop that, Celeste said sharply, stepping between Aldrich and the frog. You're hurting him. Aldrich lowered the walking stick, and the glow faded. He raised an eyebrow, looking at Celeste with new interest. Protective already? How swift. The curse works quickly once conditions are met. What curse? Arthur demanded. Speak plainly, Aldrich. I've had quite enough of riddles and magic for 1 week. Aldrich settled into one of the leather chairs without being invited, crossing his legs elegantly. Your daughter's companion is Prince Harold of the House of Evergreen, second son of the Summer Court, cursed approximately 187 years ago for crimes against his own kind. The words fell into silence. Celeste stared at Harold, who had grown very still on her shoulder. A prince, cursed for crimes. What crimes? She asked quietly. Betrayal, Aldrich said simply. Prince Harold fell in love with a human woman, which was forbidden. When his family discovered the relationship, they demanded he end it. He refused. In his anger and desperation, he revealed magical secrets to the human world, hoping to bridge the divide between realms. Instead, he nearly shattered the veil between worlds entirely. The Summer Court cursed him for his betrayal, transforming him into a frog until he could learn the true meaning of love and friendship. Harold spoke for the first time, his voice small. That's not entirely accurate. No? Aldrich's eyebrows rose. Please, enlighten us. I didn't reveal secrets to bridge worlds, Harold said, his voice growing stronger. I revealed them because I was hurt and angry and young and foolish. Because when my family forced me to choose between them and her, I wanted to hurt them back. I wanted to show them that their precious secrets weren't so precious, that humans were just as capable of understanding magic as we were. I was spiteful and reckless, and people suffered for it. The curse was just. The admission hung in the air. Celeste felt the weight of it. The centuries of regret compressed into those few sentences. She carefully lifted Harold from her shoulder and held him in her hands, looking into his eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "Would you have believed me? Yesterday at the fountain, if I'd said hello, I'm a cursed prince. Would you like to help me break my enchantment? Would you have done anything but run?" He had a point. Celeste looked at her father, who was processing this information with remarkable calm. Then again, Arthur Thorne built his fortune by accepting impossible situations and finding ways to profit from them. So the curse can be broken, Arthur said, not a question but a statement. That's why you sought out my daughter. You need her to genuinely befriend you. It's more complex than that, Aldrich interjected. The curse requires true friendship, yes, but also a moment of sacrifice. A moment where the cursed one's companion chooses him over something they value greatly. Where they act selflessly, without thought of reward. Only then can the curse be broken. And if the curse is broken, Celeste asked. Aldrich stood, walking to the window. Then Prince Harold returns to his true form. A doorway opens between the magical realm and this world, however briefly. Magic that has been sleeping for centuries begins to wake. The world changes. Whether it's ready or not. The implications were staggering. Celeste looked at Harold in her hands. This small, green creature who contains centuries of life and pain and regret. A prince who'd betrayed his own kind for love and paid with nearly 2 centuries of isolation. I didn't know, Harold said quietly, meeting her eyes. When I offered to help you at the fountain, I didn't know if you were the one who could break the curse. I've tried before, over the years, made friends with people who could see me. But it never worked. The curse never broke. Either I wasn't truly their friend, or they weren't truly mine, or the moment of sacrifice never came. I stopped hoping decades ago. Then why me? Celeste asked. Why help me at all if you'd given up hope? Harold's expression was achingly sad. Because you looked lost and lonely. And I remembered what that felt like. I thought perhaps we could be lost together for a little while. Even if nothing changed, at least we wouldn't be alone. Celeste felt something crack in her chest. Some wall she'd built around herself to keep the world at a manageable distance. This creature in her hands, this prince who'd lost everything for love and spent centuries paying for a moment of youthful spite, had reached out to her not because he needed her, but because he recognized her pain. Mr. Thorne? Aldrich said, turning from the window. I came to warn you. If this curse breaks, if magic returns to this world, It will destabilize things. The magical realm has been sealed because humans and magical beings cannot coexist peacefully. History has proven this repeatedly. Whatever affection your daughter might develop for the prince, you must understand the consequences of allowing this curse to run its course. Arthur looked at his daughter, then at the frog in her hands, then back at Aldrich. What are you suggesting? That you end this before it goes further. Send the prince away. Break the promise. Yes, it will cost your daughter's word, her honor. But it will prevent a catastrophe. No, Celeste said. Before her father could respond, she closed her hands gently around Harold, protective. Absolutely not, Celeste. Arthur started. He's my friend, she said firmly, surprising herself with how much she meant it. I made a promise, and I'm keeping it. Not because you told me to, Dad. Because I want to. Because Harold deserves to have someone choose him. Even if it costs something. Especially if it costs something. Arthur studied his daughter for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he smiled. Well said. Aldrich, I appreciate the warning. But the thorns don't break promises. And we don't abandon friends because it's inconvenient or even dangerous. My daughter will make her own choices about this situation. Aldrich's expression darkened. You're making a mistake. Perhaps. But it's our mistake to make. Arthur stood, making it clear the meeting was over. Thank you for the information. I trust you can see yourself out. Aldrich gathered his walking stick, the crystal at its top gleaming faintly. At the door, he paused. Prince Harold, a word of warning. The curse can break in two ways. Through genuine friendship and sacrifice, as intended. Or through death. Yours or your companion's. Be very careful which ending you pursue. With that ominous statement, he left. The study felt lighter without him, as if he'd been carrying some oppressive weight with him. Celeste looked at her father. You believe all this? Magic curses other realms. Arthur shrugged. I built my fortune by accepting reality as it is, not as I wish it to be. There's a talking frog in my house, who just got authenticated as a cursed prince by someone who appears to be a magical investigator. Reality has become quite strange, but denying it won't make it less true. He walked over to Celeste and gently touched Harold's head with one finger. The frog didn't flinch. Take care of your friend, Celeste, and let him take care of you. Whatever happens, at least you won't face it alone. After Arthur left, Celeste carried Harold back to her room. She sat on her bed, still holding him in her cupped hands. A prince, she said finally. You're actually a prince. Was a prince. I'm a frog. The distinction is important. Harold. My full name was Harold Evergreen of the Summer Court. I had 17 titles, 3 castles, and more magic in my smallest finger than most beings had in their entire body. I was arrogant and beautiful and absolutely certain that the world should bend to my wishes. He paused. I was also in love with a baker's daughter named Margot, who saw through all my posturing and loved me anyway, until I destroyed that too. What happened to her? She died. Old age, natural causes, about 60 years into my curse. I watched her live her life. Married someone else, had children, grandchildren. She never knew what happened to me. Why I disappeared. That was part of the curse too. Watching the one I'd sacrificed everything for live happily without me. Celeste felt tears prick her eyes. Harold, I'm so sorry. Don't be. I earned this curse. Every lonely year of it. But I am grateful, Princess, that you're choosing to honor your promise, even knowing the truth. That means more than you know. Celeste set Harold down gently on her pillow and lay beside him, their faces at the same level. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you want the curse to break? Or have you gotten used to this life? Harold was quiet for a long time. I've gotten used to it, he admitted. It's been so long, I barely remember what it felt like to be anything else. The idea of changing, of going back to that world, to that life, it terrifies me. But yes, I want the curse to break. I want to stop being a cautionary tale and start being a person again, even if I don't remember how. Celeste reached out and gently stroked his head with one finger. Harold's eyes closed. Then we'll figure it out together, she said, friend to friend. For the first time in 187 years, Prince Harold of the Summer Court felt something he'd almost forgotten hope. Chapter 6. The shift the next few days fell into a strange rhythm. Celeste went about her daily life. School, filming content, managing her social media presence. But now with Harold as a constant companion, she'd found a small, cushioned pouch that she wore crossbody, and Harold traveled in it, able to see out and comment on the world around them. At first, her followers noticed nothing different. Her posts continued, carefully curated and perfectly filtered. But something had shifted in Celeste herself, something that Harold noticed, even if her audience didn't. You're posting less, he observed one afternoon as they sat in her room. Celeste was supposed to be editing photos, but had spent the last 20 minutes just scrolling through her camera roll, deleting more than she kept. These all look the same, she said, frustrated. Same angle, same smile, same empty aesthetic. When did I become so boring? You're not boring. Your content is boring. There's a difference. Celeste laughed despite herself. You really don't believe in softening your criticisms, do you? Would you prefer I lie? Sometimes yes. Absolutely yes. Harold hopped onto her desk, landing beside her laptop. What would you post if you weren't worried about follower count? If you weren't trying to maintain an aesthetic or a brand? What would you share just because you wanted to? Celeste thought about it. The question was harder than it should have been. I don't know. Maybe books I actually like. Not just books that look good in photos. Music I listen to when no one's watching. Places I go because I want to, not because they're Instagram worthy. So why don't you? Because that's not what people follow me for. They follow me for the dream. The perfect life, the luxury, the aspiration. If I start posting about normal things, they'll get bored. They'll leave. Some will. Harold agreed. But others might appreciate seeing something real. And you might attract new followers who actually care about you, not just the character you play. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. You're afraid of being rejected for who you really are, so you show them someone else instead. But then you're lonely because no one really knows you. It's a cycle, princess. And the only way to break it is to be brave enough to be honest. Celeste stared at her laptop screen, at the dozens of identical photos waiting to be posted. Harold was right. When had she stopped being brave? When had she started hiding behind filters and carefully crafted captions? On impulse, she opened her phone and started a live stream. Harold quickly hopped out of frame, but she could see him watching from his cushion. The viewers flooded in 1,000 all, 5,000, 12,000. "Hey, everyone," Celeste said, and was surprised to hear her voice shaking slightly. "I want to try something different today. No planning, no scripting. Just talking. Is that okay?" The comments flew by. "OMG Wace. Are you okay? You seem different. Where are you? What's happening? I love your unplanned content." "I've been thinking a lot lately about authenticity," Celeste continued. "About the difference between sharing your life and performing it. And I realized I've been performing for a really long time. So long that I'm not sure I remember how to just be myself on camera anymore." More comments. "This is so real. Thank you for being honest. We love you no matter what. Please don't change. We love your content." "I'm not saying I'm going to completely change everything," Celeste clarified. "I still love fashion and design and beautiful things. But I want to share more than just pretty pictures. I want to share what I'm actually thinking, feeling, experiencing. Even when it's messy or uncertain, or not aesthetically perfect." She glanced at Harold, who nodded encouragingly from off-screen. "For example," she said, making a decision in the moment, "I've been reading this book about philosophy and consciousness, and it's completely changing how I think about identity and self. But I've never mentioned it because it doesn't fit my brand." How ridiculous is that? That I've built a life where I can't talk about a book that's important to me, because it might seem too intellectual or not on brand. The comment section was going wide now, split between people who loved this new direction and people who were confused or concerned. "Anyway," Celeste said, "I just wanted to say that I'm going to try to be more real with you all. It might be messy. It might not always be pretty, but it'll be honest. And I think that's worth more than a perfect feed." She ended the stream and sat back, her heart pounding. Harold hopped back onto the desk. "Well done," he said quietly. "I'm terrified. What if everyone unfollows me?" "Then they weren't following you anyway. They were following a ghost you created." Celeste checked her follower count obsessively over the next hour, watching for the drop. But it didn't come. Instead, her DMs filled with messages, some supportive, some critical, but all engaged. People were talking about her, about the stream, about authenticity and performance, and the pressure of social media. She'd sparked a conversation. A real one. "Harold," she said that evening as they sat on her balcony watching the city lights. Do you think the curse will break? The frog was quiet for a moment. I don't know. The conditions are specific, and they've never been met in all these years. But I think we're becoming real friends. And that matters? Whether the curse breaks or not. What was it like? Celeste asked. Being a prince in the magical realm? Harold settled more comfortably on the balcony railing. Beautiful. Terrifying. Rigid. We had rules for everything. How to speak, how to move, who could love whom, what magic could be used and when. The summer court was all about appearances, about maintaining the perfect facade. Sound familiar? Very, Celeste admitted. Did you like it, being a prince? I thought I did. I thought I loved the power, the attention, the way people deferred to me. But I think I was just as trapped as you are now. Just in a different kind of cage. The titles and castles and magic. They were just props in a performance I didn't know I was giving. And Margot saw through all that. Harold's expression grew soft with old love. She saw me. The person underneath the prince. The boy who was scared of disappointing his family. Who felt suffocated by expectations. Who wanted more than the life mapped out for him. She was the first person who ever asked me what I wanted instead of telling me what I should want. What did you want? Freedom. Choice. The ability to make my own mistakes and live with the consequences. Ironically, the curse gave me all of that. Just not in the way I'd hoped. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city lights flicker like earthbound stars. Celeste felt something loosening in her chest. Some tight knot of anxiety she'd been carrying for so long she'd forgotten. It was there. I'm glad you jumped into that fountain, she said quietly. I'm glad you dropped your ring, Harold replied. Do you think Aldrich was right? That breaking the curse would be dangerous. Probably. Magic returning to a world that's forgotten it would be chaotic. But chaos isn't always bad. Sometimes things need to be shaken up. Sometimes the comfortable order needs to be disrupted so something new can grow. Celeste thought about her own life. The comfortable prison of her carefully curated image. The safe predictability of her branded content. Maybe she needed disruption too. Maybe they both did. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mira, her assistant. Whatever you did on that live stream, do more of it. Engagement is through the roof. People are calling it brave. Real? This could be huge for your brand. Celeste almost laughed. Even her authenticity was being commodified. Even her attempt to break free was being packaged and sold. She showed the message to Harold. Your assistant has a point, he said. Authenticity sells. But the question is whether you're being authentic to attract followers, or whether you're attracting followers because you're being authentic. The motivation matters. How do I know the difference? Ask yourself if no one was watching. Would you still do it? It was a good question. Celeste thought about the live stream, about her admission of performing versus living. Would she have said those things if the camera wasn't on? Would she have had those realizations without an audience to confess them to? She didn't know. And maybe that was okay. Maybe authenticity wasn't an all or nothing proposition. Maybe it was something you practiced, something you grew into, something that became more real the more you chose it. "Come on," she said, scooping Harold up gently. "Let's go inside. I want to show you something." In her room, Celeste pulled out a box from the back of her closet. It was old, covered in dust, filled with journals and photos and mementos from before her life became content, before she became a brand. "This is me," she said, sitting on the floor with the box between them. "The real me, or at least, the me I used to be before I started performing all the time." They spent the next hour going through the box. Celeste showed Harold photos from childhood. Her at summer camp, covered in mud and grinning. Her at a science fair, presenting a project on renewable energy. Her with her mother before the divorce. Both of them laughing at something the camera couldn't capture. "You look happy here," Harold observed, studying a photo of 8-year-old Celeste building a sandcastle. "I was happy. Everything was simpler. I didn't worry about how I looked or what people thought. I just existed." "You can exist like that again, you know. It's not too late." Celeste picked up one of the old journals, flipping through pages of messy handwriting and doodles. She'd written about everything. Her dreams, her fears, her observations about the world. When had she stopped writing like this? When had she stopped having thoughts that weren't filtered through the lens of how they'd look to an audience? "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For helping me remember who I was, who I still am, underneath all the performance." Harold hopped closer, sitting on her knee. "You're welcome. Though I think you were already starting to remember. I just gave you permission to look." There was a knock on her door. "Come in," Celeste called. Her father entered, carrying his tablet as usual, but his expression was softer than normal. "I wanted to check on you. Your assistant said you did something unexpected on your live stream today." "I was honest," Celeste said. "For probably the first time in years." Arthur sat down on her bed, looking at the scattered contents of the memory box. He picked up a photo of young Celeste with her mother. "You look like her in this one." "I know. I'm sorry." "Don't be." Arthur set the photo down carefully. "I'm the one who should apologize. After your mother left, I buried myself in work. I let you drift. And when you found success with your social media, I was proud, but I didn't ask if you were happy. I assumed the success meant you were." Celeste felt tears prick her eyes. "I thought it would make me happy. The followers, the influence, the opportunities. But it's exhausting, Dad. Constantly performing, always being on, never being able to just be myself without thinking about how it'll look." "Then stop," Arthur said simply. "It's not that easy. It is actually. You're 17 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. If this isn't making you happy, you can stop. Try something else. Find what actually fulfills you." "But what about my contracts? My sponsors?" "I'll handle them. I didn't build a legal empire for nothing." Arthur smiled slightly. Besides, I'd rather have a daughter who's genuinely happy than one who's successfully miserable. Harold, who'd been quietly observing, spoke up. Mr. Thorne, you're a wise man. Thank you, Prince Harold. And please, call me Arthur. Titles seem excessive given our current circumstances. They talked for another hour, really talked, about expectations and pressure, and the weight of living up to other people's ideas of who you should be. It was the most honest conversation Celeste had had with her father in years. When Arthur finally left, Celeste felt lighter. Scared, uncertain about what came next, but lighter. You have a good father, Harold said. I know. I forget sometimes when he's busy or distant. But yeah, he is. Celeste looked at her phone, at the notifications still piling up from the live stream. For once, she didn't feel compelled to respond to them all immediately. They could wait. The performance could wait. The world would keep turning whether she posted or not. Harold. I think we're becoming real friends. The frog looked at her with those ancient, intelligent eyes. I think so too, Princess. I think so too. That night, as Celeste drifted off to sleep, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: contentment. Not the artificial high of likes and engagement, but real peace. The kind that came from being seen and accepted for who you truly were. On his cushion beside her bed, Harold watched the stars through the window and allowed himself to hope. Not for the curse to break. That seemed too much to ask after so many years of disappointment. But for this friendship to continue, to grow into something genuine and lasting. Whatever happened next, at least he wouldn't face it alone, and neither would she. That was magic enough. Chapter 7. The dinner guest. The following week brought changes that rippled through Celeste's carefully constructed world, like stones thrown into still water. She posted less frequently but more honestly. She shared the books she was actually reading: philosophy, poetry, science fiction that made her think. She talked about her struggles with performance and authenticity. Some followers left, declaring her new content too deep or not fun anymore, but others stayed, engaging more deeply than they ever had before. And through it all, Harold was there. He became a fixture in her daily life, though she kept him hidden from her public content. That was one truth she wasn't ready to share. Partly because no one would believe it. Partly because Harold was hers. Her friend. Her secret. The one part of her life that didn't need to be performed or shared. It was Friday evening, when Arthur announced they'd be having dinner guests. The Yamamoto executives again. Celeste asked, helping herself to coffee in the kitchen, while Harold sat on the counter, nibbling at a strawberry. No. More personal this time. Arthur's expression was unreadable. Claire has invited some friends. A couple she knows from her charity work. The Castellanos, Diego and his wife Maria. They're bringing their son. Celeste paused mid-sip. Their son. Apparently he's around your age. Attends Westbridge Academy. Claire thought you two might enjoy meeting. Dad. Is this a setup? Arthur had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Claire suggested it might be nice for you to meet people outside your usual circle. Given your recent recalibration of priorities. So yes, it's a setup. Celeste set her coffee down harder than necessary. You're trying to set me up with some charity circuit rich kid. I'm trying to support my wife's attempt to help you expand your social connections. Arthur corrected. Whether anything romantic develops is entirely up to you. Though I will say, Diego Castellano runs one of the most successful sustainable architecture firms in the country. His son, apparently, has inherited his father's interests and is quite accomplished in his own right. Harold, who'd been quietly observing, made a small sound that might have been amusement. Celeste shot him a look. Fine, she said. I'll be polite, but I'm not promising anything beyond that. That's all I ask. Hours later, Celeste stood in front of her mirror, trying to decide what to wear. Harold sat on her dresser, watching her try on and discard outfit after outfit. The blue dress, he suggested. It looks comfortable, and you smiled when you first put it on. I can't wear the blue dress. It's too casual for dinner with guests. Then wear what makes you uncomfortable and spend the whole evening wishing you'd chosen comfort. Very authentic. Celeste glared at him, but she put the blue dress back on. He was right. She had smiled. It was simple, comfortable, and actually felt like something she'd choose, rather than something her image consultant would recommend. There, Harold said approvingly. Now you look like yourself. What if myself isn't impressive enough? Then this boy isn't worth impressing. There was a quiet certainty in Harold's voice that made Celeste pause. In the weeks since he'd arrived, she'd grown accustomed to his observations, his gentle challenges, his refusal to let her hide behind performance. But this felt different, almost protective. Harold, are you jealous? The frog's eyes widened slightly. Jealous? Of what? Of this dinner? Of me potentially meeting someone? Harold was quiet for a long moment. I want you to be happy, princess. If this boy makes you happy, then I'm glad you're meeting him. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't concerned about losing my place in your life. The admission was so honest, so vulnerable, that Celeste felt her chest tighten. She picked Harold up gently, holding him at eye level. You're not losing anything, she said firmly. You're my friend. That doesn't change because I meet other people. Friends don't replace each other. In my experience, they often do, particularly when romance enters the picture. Well, your experience is about to be updated. Come on, you're coming to dinner with me? Celeste, I don't think. You're my friend. You're part of my life. I'm not hiding you away, like some embarrassing secret. She placed him carefully in the cushioned pouch she'd taken to wearing. Besides, you promised to sit at my dinner table. That was part of our agreement. Harold settled into the pouch without further argument, though Celeste could feel his anxiety in the way he held himself very still. The Castellanos arrived promptly at 7. Celeste watched from the top of the stairs as Marcus let them in. An elegant couple in their 50s, and with them, a young man who made her breath catch slightly. He was tall, with dark hair and warm brown eyes. Wearing a suit jacket over a vintage band T-shirt in a way that suggested he didn't care much about dress codes, but respected them anyway. When he smiled at something Claire said, it was genuine, reaching his eyes in a way that suggested he smiled often and meant it. Celeste descended the stairs, very aware of Harold in his pouch, very aware of her father watching, very aware that this was some kind of test she hadn't studied for. "Ah, Celeste," Claire called out, gesturing her over with the kind of enthusiasm that meant she'd already had a glass of wine. "Come meet our guests. Diego. Maria, this is Arthur's daughter, Celeste. And this is their son, Sebastian." Sebastian extended his hand, and Celeste shook it. His grip was warm and firm. "It's nice to meet you. My mom's been talking about this dinner all week, trying to set us up." Celeste asked, deciding on honesty. Sebastian laughed, surprised and clearly pleased by her directness. "Absolutely. She's not subtle. Fair warning, she's going to ask about your interests, your plans for college, and probably your thoughts on sustainable urban development within the first course." "Your mother sounds terrifying." "She is. But in a good way." They filed into the dining room, and Celeste found herself seated beside Sebastian, with Harold in his pouch resting on her lap beneath the table. She could feel the frog shifting slightly, listening. Dinner began pleasantly enough. Maria Castellano did indeed ask about Celeste's interests, though she seemed genuinely curious, rather than interrogating. Diego and Arthur discussed business, finding common ground in their mutual interest in technology that served humanity rather than just generating profit. Claire, slightly wine-flushed, told an entertaining story about a charity auction gone hilariously wrong. "So, Celeste," Sebastian said during a lull in conversation, "my mom mentioned you're an influencer. That must be interesting work." Celeste tensed, waiting for the usual follow-up, the requests for follows, the assumptions about her life, the reduction of everything she did to taking pretty pictures. But Sebastian's expression was open, genuinely curious. "It was," she said carefully. "I'm actually trying to shift away from that lately. Figure out who I am when I'm not performing for an audience." That sounds complicated. It is. But necessary. I was losing myself. Sebastian nodded slowly. "I get that. Not the influencer part, but the losing yourself part. I spent most of my freshman year trying to be what I thought I should be. The perfect son, the perfect student, the perfect heir to my dad's company. It was exhausting. What changed? I failed a class." He grinned at the memory. "Calculus. Completely bombed it because I was so busy being perfect everywhere else that I didn't actually study. My dad sat me down and said, 'Sebastian, perfection is boring. I'd rather have a son who's interesting and flawed than one who's perfect and miserable.'" Celeste glanced at her own father, who was watching the conversation with quiet approval. "That's really good advice. It was. Changed my whole perspective. Now I just try to be authentic, even when it's messy." They talked easily through dinner, And Celeste found herself genuinely enjoying the conversation. Sebastian was smart without being pretentious, interested in the world without being preachy about it. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He told self-deprecating stories that were funny without being desperate for approval. Celeste realized with some surprise, someone she could actually be friends with. Harold shifted in his pouch, and Celeste felt a small pressure against her hand beneath the table. She glanced down to see Harold's eyes, visible just above the pouch's edge, watching the proceedings with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Are you okay?" Sebastian asked quietly, noticing her distraction. "Yes, sorry. Just thinking about." Celeste made a decision. "Can I show you something? It's going to seem really weird." Sebastian's eyebrows rose with interest. "I'm intrigued." Celeste looked at her father, who gave her a small nod. Then she carefully lifted Harold out of the pouch and set him on the table beside her plate. The conversation stopped. Maria Castellano stared. Diego's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Claire actually gasped, which turned into a slightly wine-fueled giggle. "Everyone," Celeste said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "This is Harold, he's a friend of mine. And before you ask, yes, he's a frog. And yes, he can talk." Harold sat very still for a moment, then executed a small bow. "Good evening. Please don't let my presence disturb your meal. The salmon looks excellent." Sebastian's eyes went wide. Then, incredibly, he smiled. "A talking frog. Okay. That's actually the coolest thing I've seen all year." Maria found her voice. "Arthur, is this some kind of trick? A prank?" "No trick," Arthur said calmly. "Harold is exactly what he appears to be. He's been a guest in our home for several weeks now." Several weeks. Diego leaned forward, studying Harold with the fascination of someone who'd built a career on encountering the impossible and finding ways to work with it. "How is this possible?" "Magic," Harold said simply. "Real magic. The kind your world has forgotten, but that still exists in the spaces between what you think is real and what actually is." Sebastian was still staring at Harold, but not with fear or disgust, with wonder. "This is incredible. May I ask you questions?" "Of course." And just like that, dinner transformed into something extraordinary. Sebastian peppered Harold with questions. About magic, about how he came to be a frog, about what the world was like when magic was common. Harold answered with his usual eloquence, clearly pleased to have someone so genuinely interested. Celeste watched the interaction with a strange mix of emotions. She was glad Sebastian was handling this so well. Glad he was kind to Harold. Glad the dinner hadn't dissolved into chaos. But there was also something else. Something she couldn't quite name. Watching Sebastian and Harold talk so easily. "Your friend is remarkable," Maria said quietly to Celeste, while the others were engaged in conversation. "And the fact that you're willing to share him with us, to be vulnerable enough to show us this secret, that says a lot about your character." "Thank you," Celeste said, surprised by how much the compliment meant. "Sebastian likes you," Maria continued, I can tell. And not because of your follower count or your father's money. He likes that you're real with him. I'm trying to be real with everyone lately. It's harder than it sounds. The best things usually are after dinner. The adults retreated to the sitting room for coffee, but Sebastian asked if he and Celeste could talk on the balcony. Harold, settled back in his pouch, came with them. The city sprawled below, lights twinkling like captured stars. Sebastian leaned against the railing, looking out at the view. So, he said, cursed prince turned into a frog. That's your normal Tuesday. Celeste laughed. Nothing about my life has been normal since he showed up, but in a good way. He seems important to you. He is. He's been helping me figure out who I actually am. Underneath all the performance. Sebastian was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something? And you can tell me if it's too forward. Go ahead. Would you want to hang out sometime? Not as a setup. Not because our parents think we should, but because I think you're interesting and I'd like to get to know you better. As friends, to start. See where it goes. Celeste felt Harold shift in his pouch. She put her hand over it gently. Reassuring. I'd like that, she said honestly. But I need you to understand. Harold is part of my life. I'm not going to hide him or pretend he doesn't exist. If we're friends, you're signing up for the weirdness. Sebastian grinned. Celeste. I spend my weekends designing sustainable housing for underserved communities and arguing with city planning commissions about green space requirements. I live for weirdness. A talking frog just raises the bar in the best possible way. Then yes, let's hang out. They exchanged numbers, made tentative plans for coffee later that week, and headed back inside. The Castellanos left around 10, with Maria hugging Celeste and whispering, You're a remarkable young woman. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. After they'd gone, Celeste carried Harold up to her room. She set him on his cushion and lay down on her bed, staring at the ceiling. He seems nice, Harold said quietly. He is nice. Really nice. Good. You deserve nice. Harold, are you okay? You've been quiet since dinner. The frog was silent for a long moment. I'm fine, princess. Just adjusting. Watching you connect with someone, seeing how easy it is for you to be yourself with him. It's good. It's what I wanted for you. But it also reminds me that my time here is limited. Eventually, you won't need me anymore. You'll have real friends, real connections, a real life. And you'll be what? I don't know. That's what frightens me. The curse either breaks or it doesn't. If it breaks, I return to a world I don't know anymore. To a life I'm not sure I remember how to live. If it doesn't, I go back to fountains and parks and centuries more of loneliness. Either way, I lose you. Celeste sat up, looking at Harold directly. You're not losing me. Whether the curse breaks or not, you're my friend. That doesn't end just because circumstances change. You can't promise that. I can, actually. I'm promising it right now. You're stuck with me, Harold. For better or worse. Harold's eyes glistened in the dim light. You don't know what you're promising. maybe not. But I'm promising it anyway. That's what friends do. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of promises and possibilities hanging between them. Outside, the city hummed with life. People living and loving and making their own promises, most of which they'd probably break. But not this one, Celeste thought. Not this promise. Not this friend. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Chapter 8. The bargain. The next morning, Celeste woke to find Harold already awake. Sitting at the window and watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. There was something in his posture that spoke of sleeplessness, of thoughts too heavy to allow rest. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked, her voice rough with mourning. "Not much. I've been thinking. About Sebastian. About everything. About the curse, about friendship. About what happens next." Harold turned to face her. "Celeste, I need to tell you something. About the curse." She sat up, suddenly more awake. "What about it?" Aldrich said there were two ways for it to break. True friendship and sacrifice, or death. But there's a third way he didn't mention. Or perhaps he did. In his own cryptic manner. "What way?" Harold hopped onto her bed, his small form somehow carrying immense weight. "I can choose to accept the curse. To stop fighting it, to embrace this form as my permanent reality. If I do that, the curse becomes not a punishment but a choice. I would remain a frog forever. But I would be free from the magical bindings. I could live a normal frog's lifespan, simple and unaware. Rather than this eternal life of consciousness and memory." Celeste felt her chest tighten. "You'd give up who you are? Just become a regular frog?" "I'd give up the burden of being a cursed prince. I'd give up the waiting, the hoping, the endless cycle of disappointment. I just exist. Simply. Without the weight of centuries. Is that what you want?" Harold was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. A month ago, I might have said yes. The idea of finally resting. Of letting go of all this." He gestured at himself with one webbed foot. It was almost appealing. "But now I have something to lose. I have you. Our friendship. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, the curse could break properly. That I could be myself again. And that possibility, however slim, makes the idea of giving up feel like cowardice." Celeste reached out and gently stroked his head. "What brought this on? Why are you thinking about this now?" "Sebastian," Harold admitted, "watching you with him, seeing how easily you connected. It made me realize how close we are to the moment of truth. Either our friendship becomes strong enough to break the curse, or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, if I've failed again after getting so close, I'm not sure I can bear another century of this." "Harold, I'm not trying to pressure you," he said quickly. "I'm not trying to force a sacrifice or manipulate you into some grand gesture. I'm just being honest, like you've been teaching me to be." Celeste lay back down, and Harold hopped onto the pillow beside her head, small and vulnerable and ancient all at once. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything. What would you do if the curse broke? If you became yourself again?" What's the first thing you'd want to do? Harold considered the question seriously. I think I'd want to feel the sun on my face. My real face. I'd want to touch things with hands instead of webbed feet. I'd want to taste food properly, to speak without people recoiling in shock, to walk down a street without being afraid someone would step on me. He paused. And I'd want to hug you. A proper hug. To thank you for seeing me when I was invisible to everyone else. Celeste felt tears prick her eyes. That's a good first thing. What about you? What would you want if you could have anything? Honestly, I think I want what I'm starting to have. Genuine connections. The freedom to be myself. A life that feels real instead of performed. She smiled slightly. Though having my cursed frog friend become a prince would be pretty cool too. Just saying. Harold made a sound that might have been a laugh. We're quite a pair, aren't we? A princess who wants to stop being perfect, and a prince who wants to be human again. Former prince. Celeste corrected gently. No, Harold said quietly. I think I'm starting to remember that prince. The boy I was before the curse. Before the bitterness and isolation twisted me. He wasn't all bad. He just needed someone to see him clearly enough that he could see himself. They lay there in comfortable silence as the sun rose higher, painting Celeste's room in warm morning light. Eventually, her phone buzzed with a text from Sebastian. Good morning. Still processing the fact that talking frogs are real. Coffee this week still on. Celeste showed the message to Harold. Should I go? Of course you should go. He's a good person. And you deserve good people in your life. Come with me. Harold's eyes widened. To your coffee date. It's not a date. It's hanging out. And yes, you should come. You're part of my life now. I'm not compartmentalizing my friendships. Celeste, that's not how courting works. You can't bring a talking frog to. We're not courting. We're getting coffee. As friends. And you're coming. She picked up her phone and texted back. Coffee sounds great. Fair warning. Harold's coming too. Hope that's okay. Sebastian's response came quickly. Are you kidding? That's even better. I have about 1,000 more questions for him. Harold shook his head, but Celeste could see the pleasure in his eyes. He wanted to be included, even if he'd never admit it. The week passed quickly. Celeste continued her gradual transformation of her social media presence, posting less but more meaningfully. She shared photos of the books she was reading, the thoughts she was having, the process of rediscovering herself. Her follower count stabilized. She'd lost about 15% of her audience. But the ones who remained were more engaged than ever. More importantly, she felt lighter. Like she was shedding a skin that had never quite fit. Friday arrived, and with it, coffee with Sebastian. Celeste chose a quiet cafe far from her usual haunts, a place that valued actual coffee over Instagram aesthetics. Harold rode in his customary pouch, commenting occasionally on the changing neighborhoods they passed through. Sebastian was already there when they arrived, sitting at a corner table with 3 cups of coffee in front of him. I didn't know what you liked. he said as Celeste sat down. So I got a latte, an Americano, and a cappuccino. Take your pick. Very thorough, Celeste said, choosing the latte. Thank you. She set Harold's pouch on the table, and the frog hopped out, settling beside the sugar packets. Sebastian leaned forward, fascinated. Okay, he said. I've been researching curses all week. You have, Celeste interrupted. Of course I have. How often do you meet a cursed prince? This is literally the most interesting thing that's ever happened to me. He pulled out a small notebook. I have questions if you don't mind, Harold. I'm an open book, Harold said, amused. They spent the next hour in deep conversation. Sebastian asked thoughtful questions about the magical realm, about the nature of curses, about how Harold had survived nearly 2 centuries of isolation. Harold answered honestly, clearly enjoying having someone so genuinely interested in his story. Celeste watched them talk and felt something warm bloom in her chest. This was what friendship looked like. Easy conversation, genuine interest, no performance required. Both of them were being authentically themselves, and it was beautiful. Can I ask about the curse? Breaking conditions, Sebastian said eventually. From a purely academic perspective, Aldrich mentioned true friendship and a moment of sacrifice. What does that actually mean? Harold glanced at Celeste before answering. It means someone has to choose me over something they value greatly. Someone has to decide that my well-being matters more than their own comfort, safety, or desires. It has to be genuine, selfless and freely chosen. No manipulation, no obligation, just pure choice. That's a high bar, Sebastian observed. It's meant to be. The curse wasn't designed to be easily broken. It was designed to teach me that love and friendship require sacrifice. That caring about someone means putting their needs above your own sometimes. That relationships aren't transactional. They're transformational. Sebastian was quiet for a moment, processing. Then he looked at Celeste. Have you thought about what would happen if the curse broke? Like, practically speaking. What do you mean? Well, if Harold becomes human, or whatever his original form was, where does he go? What does he do? He's been a frog for nearly 200 years. The world he knew is gone. Does he just start over? It was a question Celeste hadn't fully considered. She'd been so focused on the curse, breaking as a good thing, a happy ending, that she hadn't thought about the practical aftermath. I don't know, she admitted. We haven't really talked about it. Harold was very still. I suppose I'd figure it out. I've gotten quite good at adapting over the years. You could stay with us, Celeste said impulsively. At the mansion. My dad wouldn't mind. Celeste, I can't. Why not? You're my friend. Friends help each other. And it's not like we don't have the space. Because I won't be a charity case, Harold said, gently but firmly. If the curse breaks, I need to build my own life. I need to figure out who I am in this new world. I can't do that hiding in your mansion, dependent on your family's generosity. It wouldn't be hiding. It would be. Harold interrupted. And you know it. Just as you're learning to stand on your own, to be yourself outside of your father's empire and your followers' expectations, I would need to do the same. We'd both need space to grow into who we're meant to be. Sebastian had been listening quietly. Now he spoke up. What if you didn't have to figure it all out alone? What if you had friends to help? Not to live your life for you, but to support you while you figure out your next chapter. Harold looked at Sebastian with surprise. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're kind, intelligent, and you've survived nearly 2 centuries of a curse that would have broken most people. I know you care deeply about Celeste and want what's best for her. I know you're scared of what comes next, but brave enough to face it anyway. Sebastian shrugged. Seems like the kind of person worth being friends with. You're a strange young man, Harold said, but his voice was warm. I get that a lot. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily between serious and light-hearted topics. When they finally left the cafe, the sun was setting, painting the city in shades of orange and gold. Thank you, Harold said to Sebastian as they prepared to part ways, for treating me like a person instead of a curiosity. You are a person, Sebastian said simply. Just in an unusual package. Though I have to say, when the curse breaks, I'm going to miss the frog version. You're very expressive for someone with no eyebrows. Harold actually laughed. A real laugh, full and genuine. Walking home, with Harold back in his pouch, and the evening air cool on her face, Celeste felt something shift inside her. She'd spent so long performing friendship, curating connections for her audience, that she'd forgotten what real friendship felt like. This was it. This ease, this honesty. This sense of being seen and accepted for exactly who you were. I like him, Harold said from his pouch. Me too, Celeste agreed. He's good for you. Challenges you in gentle ways, asks good questions, doesn't let you hide but doesn't push too hard. He's good for you too. You've been more yourself today than I've ever seen you. Harold was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about what he asked. About what happens after the curse breaks. And I think he's right. I can't hide in your world. I need to build my own life. But the thought of losing our friendship terrifies me. You won't lose it? Celeste said firmly. Friendships don't end just because circumstances change. They evolve. And ours will too. Whatever happens. You sound very certain. I am certain. You taught me to be authentic, Harold. The most authentic thing I can tell you is that you matter to me. Frog or prince or anything in between, you matter. That night, as Celeste settled into bed, she felt the pieces of her life arranging themselves in new patterns. Her social media presence was smaller, but more meaningful. Her friendship with Harold was deeper than she'd ever expected. And now Sebastian was entering the picture, adding another dimension to her world. Things were changing. She was changing. And for the first time in years, the change didn't terrify her. It felt right. On his cushion, Harold watched the stars through the window and allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, This time would be different. Maybe this time, the curse would break. Maybe this time, he'd get his second chance. Maybe this time he'd earned it. Chapter 9. The power sink. The dinner had been a slow motion car crash of social etiquette and digital performance. Her father, Julian, had treated the entire evening like a high-stakes merger negotiation. To him, the frog wasn't a magical being. He was a contractual obligation. He had insisted Celeste seat Harold on a stack of velvet-bound tech journals so he could reach the table, while the invited investors, men in sharp suits who spoke in terms of scalability and market disruption, watched with barely concealed sneers. Every time Harold's wet flippers hit the mahogany table, Tiana felt a spike of shame, so sharp it felt physical. She had spent years building a brand based on the aspiration, the idea that life could be perfect, clean, and frictionless. Now, there was a literal amphibian eating microgreens off a porcelain plate at a 3-Michelin-star dinner. As the last of the investors filed out, casting confused, mocking glances at the girl and her frog, Celeste scooped him up. Her manicured nails trembled with a mix of exhaustion and suppressed rage. "You've had your dinner," she whispered, her voice tight and brittle. "Now please, just let me call you a car. I'll pay for a private pond at the botanical gardens. I'll buy the land, just go. A deal is a deal." "Celeste," Harold croaked. His golden eyes reflected the cold LED strips of the grand hallway. "You promised me a place to rest. My battery, my spirit, is low, and your room has the best signal. The ring is there." "It's a bedroom, Harold, not a charging station," she snapped. But her father's stern gaze from the study doorway silenced her. A promise made was a brand maintained. In Julian's eyes, she carried him up the glass staircase to her sanctuary. Her room was a minimalist's dream. All white silk, brushed aluminum, and high-end hardware. She placed him on a marble coaster on her nightstand, right next to the sleek charging dock, where her enchanted smart ring sat. The ring pulsed with a soft, ethereal blue light, a heartbeat of ancient magic trapped in a 21st century shell. "Fine," she said, clicking her tongue to dim the lights to 10%. "Stay on the coaster. Don't touch the sheets. And for heaven's sake, stop looking at me like that." She climbed into bed, pulling the duvet up to her chin, but the silence of the mansion only made Harold's presence louder. He didn't sleep. He sat perfectly still, watching the ring glow. "It's a beautiful piece of technology," Harold said quietly. His voice seemed to vibrate against the marble. "But it wasn't made in a lab, was it? You know it feels different. It hums with a frequency that doesn't belong to this electrical grid. It hums with the frequency of home. It's an heirloom." Celeste groaned, rolling over to face the wall. "It's just gold and a few sensors. Go to sleep, Harold." "I can't sleep," he replied. His voice dropped to a somber, almost human tone that made Celeste's skin prickle. "Not when I'm so close to the end of the line. I've spent centuries in the cold, Celeste. I've lived in palace drains and city sewers. I've watched worlds end and new ones be built out of steel and glass. I just need to stay until morning. I just need to feel the warmth of a promise kept. Is that what this is to you? Celeste asked, turning back to him. A test. You're tracking my integrity, like some kind of social credit score. I'm tracking your heart, he said simply. You've spent so long curating your life for people who don't know you. You've become a reflection of what they want to see. But the ring sees who you actually are. That's why it fell. It wanted to see if you would reach into the mud to get it back. I did reach into the mud, she reminded him bitterly. No, Harold said softly. You asked someone else to do it for you. You traded a friendship you didn't think you'd have to provide for a piece of jewelry you couldn't stand to lose. You haven't truly reached for anything yet, Celeste. The words stung because they were true. Her entire life was a series of delegates and filters. She felt a wave of hot, uncomfortable resentment. He was a frog, a guest in her home by sheer technicality, and he was judging the very foundation of her existence. You don't know me, she said, her voice shaking. You don't know what it's like to have every move watched, to have your entire future depend on being perfect. I retrieved you because I had to. I'm letting you stay because I have to. Isn't that enough? It's enough for a contract, Harold said, closing his eyes. But it's not enough for a curse. Tiana closed her eyes, but the sound of his rhythmic, wet breathing on her nightstand felt like a physical weight. The friendship he wanted felt less like a social connection and more like an invasion of the carefully constructed walls she had built around herself. Tomorrow, she decided, she would find a way to end this. She would find a way to return to the world of glass and light, where things were simple, clean, and didn't ask for her soul in exchange for a favor. But as she drifted into a fitful sleep, the smart ring began to pulse faster, its blue light turning a sharp, warning shade of violet. Chapter 10. The breaking point. The silence of the mansion was never truly silent. It was a symphony of high and white noise. The hum of the climate control, the distant whir of the server room, the rhythmic pulse of security sensors. But at 3 a.m, a new sound began to override the luxury. It was a low, distorted thrumming that didn't belong to the house's circuitry. Celeste bolted upright, her heart hammering against her ribs. The room was bathed in a flickering, unstable light. It wasn't the soft blue of her charging ring, but a jagged, static, green glow that seemed to be leaking from Harold. The frog was standing on all fours, atop the marble coaster, his sides heaving in a way that looked agonizing. Harold, she whispered, her anger from earlier replaced by a cold, sharp dread. What's happening? Are you sick? That the synchronization, Harold gasped. His voice was no longer a clear croak. It sounded like a corrupted audio file, doubling over itself with a strange, metallic resonance. The ring, it's a conduit. But the connection it's rejected. The system is crashing. Celeste. He looked smaller, more fragile, as if the physical laws of her minimalist bedroom were trying to delete him. The green light intensified, casting long, monstrous shadows against her white walls. "What do I do?" she asked, reaching for her phone instinctively, as if there were an app for magical failure. "Do I call Sebastian? Do I need to get you back to the fountain?" "It's the proximity," Harold wheezed, his golden eyes wide and panicked. "The curse. It's fueled by the distance between what we promised and what we feel. You brought me here out of obligation, not out of the friendship the magic requires. The vacuum, it's pulling me apart." Before she could respond, he hopped. He didn't stay on the coaster. He launched himself onto her bed, landing with a heavy, wet thwack right next to her hand. Celeste recoiled, her back hitting the headboard. "Harold, stay back! You're glowing. You're going to burn the sheets." "I'm cold," he pleaded, and for the first time, he sounded like the boy he had once been, terrified and alone. "The magic is freezing. Please, Celeste. Just a moment of genuine warmth. Just look at me. Not as a problem to be solved. Not as a brand risk. Look at me." He crawled closer, leaving a trail of shimmering, iridescent slime across her 4,000 thread, count silk duvet. He reached out with a trembling, webbed foot and touched the skin of her arm. The contact was like a live wire. A jolt of pure, ancient electricity surged through Celeste, but it wasn't a spark of magic. It was a violent, jarring rejection. The ring on the nightstand let out a piercing, high-frequency whine, and the smell of ozone filled the air. "Get off!" Celeste shrieked. The fear, the weeks of suppressed frustration, the exhaustion of maintaining her perfect image, and the sheer sensory revulsion of his cold, damp skin combined into a single, explosive impulse. "I said G'd OF me." She didn't think. She didn't weigh the consequences, or remember the lessons Harold had tried to teach her about authenticity. She saw a bug in her system, a glitch in her perfect life, and she reacted with the same cold efficiency she used to delete a negative comment thread. She grabbed the frog in her fist. His body felt impossibly small and heart-wrenchingly soft, pulsing with a frantic heartbeat. With a scream of pure, unadulterated rage, she flung him away from her. Harold sailed across the room, a blur of static, green light against the shadows. There was a sickening, heavy thud as he struck the far wall, hitting the center of a digital portrait of Celeste. A sleek, edited image of her smiling perfectly at nothing. The impact cracked the screen of the digital frame. The light around Harold didn't fade, it fractured. Celeste froze, her hands still raised, her breath coming in ragged, sobbing gasps. The silence that followed was deafening. The anger evaporated instantly, leaving behind a hollow, terrifying void. "Harold," she whispered, her voice trembling. She looked at the base of the wall, expecting to see a broken, lifeless creature. She expected the guilt to be a heavy thing, but what she felt was the air in the room beginning to change. The temperature plummeted, and the scent of damp earth and ancient pine needles suddenly overwhelmed the expensive room. Diffuser's scent of white tea and linen. The point on the wall where Harold had struck began to pixelate, but the pixels were made of gold and shadow. The digital portrait flickered and died, replaced by a swirling vortex of iridescent mist. "Oh no," she breathed, sliding off the bed, her knees hitting the floor. "Harold, I'm sorry. I didn't mean, I wasn't." But the frog didn't fall. He remained suspended in the air against the wall, his small form beginning to stretch and distort as the system of the curse finally, violently, forced a reboot. Chapter 11. The system reboot. The room didn't just go quiet, it seemed to hold its breath. The silence was heavy, pressurized, like the moment before a storm breaks over a glass city. Celeste remained on her knees, her eyes fixed on the spot where Harold had struck the wall. She expected to see the tragic end of a story. A small, broken body on the designer rug. Instead, she witnessed the laws of physics being overwritten. The fracture in the digital portrait frame wasn't just leaking liquid crystals. It was leaking light so bright, it felt like looking at the sun through a telescope. It was a thick, honeyed gold that moved with the fluidity of water, pooling on the floor and defying gravity as it crawled up the walls. The static Celeste had heard earlier transformed into a deep, symphonic roar, a sound that felt less like noise and more like a fundamental frequency of the earth itself. In the center of this blinding radiance, Harold's silhouette began to change. It was an agonizing, beautiful process. The small, emerald shape of the frog stayed suspended in the air, but its edges began to blur and extend. It was like watching a master painter pull a single drop of ink into a sprawling masterpiece. Long, elegant limbs stretched out where webbed feet had been, a spine lengthened and arched. The hunched posture of an amphibian smoothed into the broad, noble shoulders of a man. The smart ring on the nightstand acted as the anchor for the entire event. It didn't just glow, it screamed with light. A beam of pure, sapphire energy shot from the ring's sensor, connecting to the center of the golden vortex. The ring wasn't just jewelry, it was a bridge, and Celeste's violent act of rejection had been the final, desperate surge of energy needed to collapse the bridge and force the traveler across. The smell of the room changed completely. The sterile, expensive scent of smart home was replaced by something wild and overwhelming: crushed lilies, old parchment, mountain air, and the metallic tang of a coming thunderstorm. With a final, deafening crack that sounded like a redwood tree snapping in half, the golden light imploded. The pressure in the room vanished. The digital screens around the room flickered once and went black. Standing in the center of the room, gasping for air, as if he had just emerged from the depths of an icy lake, was a young man. He was tall, with the lean, hard, one muscle of someone who had spent a lifetime in motion. He was dressed in a tunic of deep, shadowed emerald, embroidered with gold thread that shimmered even in the dim light of the room. His skin was pale and damp, his dark hair clinging to his forehead, but it was his eyes that stopped Celeste's breath. They were the same golden, amber eyes that had watched her from the fountain. But now they were set in a human face, one marked by a weary, ancient grace. He swayed on his feet, his hands, real, human hands with long, tapering fingers, reaching out to steady himself against the wall. He touched the cracked digital frame, his fingers tracing the shattered image of Celeste's perfect face. The wall, he wheezed. His voice was no longer a fractured croak, it was a rich, velvet baritone that seemed to echo in the very marrow of Celeste's bones. You threw me against the wall, and the curse couldn't survive the impact of your truth. Celeste couldn't move. Her heart was beating so fast she felt lightheaded. Harold? The name I took in the dark, he said, turning to look at her. He didn't look angry. He looked relieved. But I remember the other one now. Alaric. Prince Alaric of the Silken Veils. I hurt you, she whispered, her eyes filling with tears of shock and guilt. I was so angry and No, Alaric said, taking a shaky step toward her. He didn't move like the influencers or the tech moguls she knew. There was an animal stillness to him, a gravity that commanded the space around him. You didn't hurt me, Celeste. You broke the shell. The curse required a moment of absolute, uncurated emotion. It didn't have to be love. It just had to be real. Your rage was the most honest thing you've ever given me. He held out his hand, not the cold, slimy flipper that had touched her arm, but a hand that radiated a soft, steady warmth. The contract is over, he said softly. But I think the story is just beginning. Behind him, the smart ring on the nightstand began to hum again. But this time, the light wasn't staying in the room. It was beginning to bleed outward, through the windows and into the sleeping city beyond. Chapter 12. Version 2.0. Alaric stood in the center of the minimalist suite, a figure of ancient myth, draped in silk and shadow, looking entirely out of place amidst the sleek glass and high-end hardware. But the transformation wasn't contained to his body. The smart ring on the nightstand didn't cease its activity. It began to broadcast. A pillar of pure, iridescent light shot upward, passing through the ceiling of the mansion and piercing the night sky like a silent, magical flare. Celeste scrambled to her feet, her instinctual urge to reach for her phone, to document, to share, to filter, fighting with a sudden, grounding sense of reality. She looked at her device, lying forgotten on the duvet. It was vibrating with a frantic, stuttering energy. Notifications scrolling so fast they were a blur of white light. The ring, she whispered, her voice trembling as she looked at the beacon. It's not stopping. Alaric, what is it doing? Alaric walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, his movements fluid, and waited with a dignity that made the high-tech room look like a plastic toy. It's a system-wide reboot, Celeste. The curse didn't just hide me, it acted as a firewall. It suppressed the magical ley lines of this entire region to keep my realm and yours separate. By breaking the shell, you've reconnected the circuit. You've crashed the gates. Celeste joined him at the window. Below them, the sprawling, neon-lit city was waking up in a way that defied every algorithm. The streetlights weren't flickering. They were evolving. The sterile, blue, white LEDs were warming into a soft, flickering amber that mimicked the glow of 1,000 lanterns. In the garden below, the fountain where they had first met began to flow upward, the water carving intricate, glowing runes into the air, before splashing back into a basin that now shimmered with liquid starlight. "Look at the skyline," she breathed, pointing toward the downtown core. The digital billboards that usually flashed aggressive advertisements for crypto exchanges and luxury skincare were glitching. In their place, shimmering high-definition images of silver forests, floating citadels, and dragons with scales, like polished chrome appeared, glimpses of Alaric's realm, bleeding through the cracks of the digital grid. The city was no longer just a hub of commerce, it was becoming a crossroads of wonder. "My world and yours have been separated by a barrier of spite for too long," Alaric said, turning to face her. The golden light of the new dawn caught the embroidery of his tunic. He held out his hand. It was warm, humming with a power she could finally feel without the mediation of a device. "You didn't want a friend, Celeste. You wanted your status back. You wanted the perfect life you'd been sold. But in your moment of raw, honest fury, you gave the world something much bigger than a viral post. You gave it back its soul." Celeste looked at his hand, then at her phone, which was now displaying a map of the city, lit up with anomalies. Her follower count was skyrocketing as millions of people across the city filmed the magic returning to the streets. For the first time in her life, she felt a profound sense of detachment from the numbers. They felt small. They felt like glass beads compared to the weight of the man standing before her. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers interlocking with his. "So, what happens now? Do you go back? Does the portal close?" Alaric looked out at the glowing horizon, where the sun was rising over a world that was no longer just tech and steel. "No, the realms are syncing. The modern and the magical are merging into a single operating system. I think I'll need a guide to navigate this world of yours. Someone who knows that a screen is just a window, not the view itself." Celeste smiled, a genuine, uncurated expression that no ring could have enhanced. She reached over to the nightstand, picked up the smart ring, now silent, heavy, and glowing with a permanent, gentle warmth, and slipped it onto her finger. It didn't feel like a piece of tech anymore. It felt like a part of her. "I think I can handle that," she said, her voice steady. "But first, we're going to have to explain the glitch in the living room to my father and Alaric. You're going to need to learn how to use a fork. No more eating with your hands or your tongue." Alaric laughed, a rich, human sound that filled the room. "A fair trade, Celeste. A very fair trade. Together." The princess of the digital age and the prince of the silken veils stood at the window, watching as the world updated into something legendary. The story wasn't over. It had simply moved out of beta. The end.